Hey YouTube! Today we are going to discuss how to stay warm during the winter, or at least how to manage the cold.
So there are things that we do for our specific travel plans and just how we like to keep warm in the winter. This might not apply to anyone or to everyone, but there are also other things that we've noticed that you can do that might work better for you. So we do travel a lot. We typically move spots every 2 weeks, and so there are some more permanent heating solutions that we don't do just because we do travel so often. Also, we look for campgrounds that don't charge us electricity usage per kilowatt hour, and so that's why we typically try to heat our RV with space heaters rather than the propane heater, because it's much more of an ordeal for us to fill up our onboard propane tank than just running a space heater. So what we do, and also just due to our layout and trying to keep our birds warm, on very cold nights, we will run one space heater on high in the main compartment where the birds are. On a different circuit, we'll run a space heater on low, again in the same compartment, and then another space heater on low for our bedroom, which is in a different space in the motorhome. That typically does allow us to not run the propane furnace throughout the night, and it keeps the birds warm, and then if we get cold, then we have a comforter for that. But otherwise, we try not to use our propane furnace too much because it's a lot harder to replace a propane furnace than go out and buy a new space heater. Also, our motorhome is 10 years old, and so the propane furnace is an older one, and so if you have a newer RV, you might not be as concerned about that, but since we have had a few issues with it not lighting, that's why we trust new space heaters rather than using propane too much. Some other strategies that we've seen that other people use is not having your pop-outs popped out during the night, because that does having them popped in reduces the volume of air that you need to heat, and so you won't have as much room to heat. Also, if you're staying in one place for a long time, a month, 2 months, just staying the winter someplace, a common thing to see is people will board up the bottom of their RV with insulation to be able to keep more heat in underneath rather than having cold air move in underneath the RV and cool the RV too much. Also, another thing you can do if you're fine using propane is that you can go out and buy very large bottles of propane, probably on the order...
And you're as big as me.
Yeah, like 20, 30, 40 gallons of propane. Granted, that's got to be a pain to try to refill, but I'm sure that lasts them a long time versus our 14-gallon little bottle of propane on the motorhome. And so basically what our strategy is to use more electricity to heat the motorhome so that we save the propane for if it gets too cold to run the furnace, but also to run our water heater, because as the temperature drops, the water heater does have to run more often. And so we try to minimize how often we have to refill.
And also, a good thing to know is that Michael and I know that our propane furnace, will go off even when there's no electricity at the RV park. So our batteries have enough power in them to get a spark going for that. So by using space heaters and saving the propane, we then have enough propane that if the RV park lost power, we can use our propane to heat us up. So that's another thing to consider, is that RV parks do lose power every once in a while. It's not often, but it does happen. And then during severe weather, like a snowstorm during the middle of winter when it's cold, could potentially knock out power to your RV park. So that's something to consider as well. Another thing to consider is, although popping in may save you some heat, it sure is not going to save you any space. You're going to be bumping into each other.
Yep.
So that's another thing to consider, and that's why we don't pop in. I'd rather lose a little heat and have to make up for that than to run into him every single day.
Yep, and another thing, just I touched on it earlier, but just to keep in mind, is that if you notice that we have one space heater on high and then two space heaters on low, because we have a 30 amp fuse in here. And so just be aware that as you're calculating how much energy you're using so that you don't blow a fuse, the math works out to one space heater on high uses 12.5 amps. So for us to heat up the motorhome with electricity means that we're using 25 amps total, which leaves us 5 amps to charge our laptops, run the lights, everything like that. Another thing that I've recently done, I don't know how much it helps, but we've switched our overhead lights back to incandescent light bulbs away from LEDs, because incandescent light bulbs, while they are inefficient from a light bulb standpoint, I think they're about 5% or 95% inefficient. Where it becomes, where that inefficiency is in heat. And so we want to heat up the motorhome, and so we're getting light and heat from that. So that's just one thing. Again, don't know how much it helps, but we do try to use LED bulbs in the summer and then incandescent bulbs in the winter.
And don't forget that the sun is your friend during the winter. Michael and I generally won't try to run the AC, even if it's getting a little warm outside. If it's going to be a cold night, we'll probably let it get up to 75, 80 in here, but probably no more because of the birds. They just don't do well over 80. But we'll let it heat up in here because that's really good for expanding that period where you don't have to use any heat sources.
Yep.
Another thing is if you happen to travel on a really cold day, that's awesome because you'll end up putting a lot of heat into the bottom of your RV. And we've noticed that sometimes we've actually been like, maybe we should run the AC even though it's like 40 degrees outside, because it's just so warm in here after driving such a far distance. And we usually do around 7-hour drive, somewhere around there. So that's also great. So you could always take your RV out on the highway for a little drive. Although we probably wouldn't recommend that, because having to do that would be a really inefficient way of trying to heat your RV. But
yep,
it's there.
When you're coming back from travel days, especially during spring or summer or fall, just know that you are going to be dealing with heat from the road when you initially get back to your spot. And so just thinking if you want to run the AC and expel that heat, or if it's going to get cold, just keep that heat in and just use the heat that you've already produced.
Yeah. So hopefully you find our tips useful. Please feel free to comment below. Don't forget to like, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos that we will produce in the near future. Have a great day.